Alright, so today we're going to be covering 1.5 absolute value. Today is the 10th, and we're looking at pages 13 through 14. You need to make sure it's also written on your second table of contents, the one for Unit 1, 1.5 absolute value. And then we are taking notes on page 14, which is on the right side. Okay, so you need to make sure that that's on the right side of your notebook. We're going to write all the notes on the right side. And then the left side will have a foldable, which is the little paper you guys have. So looking at your paper, make sure it's on this side where it has all the words. And you're just going to fold it like a book. Okay, so you're just going to fold it like a book. Okay, so you look at the words and you're just going to fold it kind of like a book. Okay, so on the outside it says integers and absolute values. So we're just going to review real quick what integers are. So I need someone that can read the first one. Sabrina, go ahead.
Positive numbers?
Positive numbers.
Positive numbers are greater than 0. They are sometimes written with positive, but most times are not, or positive 6 and 7.
Good, thank you. So they're just saying that, you know, integers are your positives. Sometimes you'll see a plus sign, but do you usually see a plus sign next to a number?
No.
No. So if you don't see anything next to it, we're going to assume it's a positive number, okay? Allison, negative numbers?
Negative numbers are less than 0 and are always written with negative. Negative 5, negative 11, and negative 15.
Good. So usually when we have negative numbers, you'll see that line next to the number. Another way we see it most of the time is we see it in parentheses, right? Like negative 7. So if you see a number like this, we know it's what? Negative. Okay. So those are the integers, right? Positive and negative numbers. Nayeli, go ahead and read additive inverse.
Additive, inverse, or opposite are numbers and their opposite. 4 and negative 4, negative 6 and 6.
Good, thank you. So you'll hear these sometimes, additive inverse or the opposite, right? We've been saying opposite a lot. So this is just saying that the opposite of a positive number is its negative version, right? So what's the opposite of a negative 8? Positive 8, right? What's the opposite of a positive 12? Negative 12. So it's just the same number, opposite sign. Okay, and then absolute value. Nick, go ahead.
Absolute value of an integer is the distance from 0 on the number line. It is always positive and written in line.
Okay, so key words here. Distance from 0. Okay, so when we look at absolute value, and that's what we're learning today, it's the distance from 0. So how far away is the number from 0? On the number line. And it says it's always going to be what?
Positive.
Positive. And you're going to use, these are straight lines. They're kind of like if there were parentheses, but they're straight. Okay, so absolute value, it's the distance from 0. We're always going to get a positive answer. And we're always going to take the absolute value whenever we see those straight lines. Okay, so you see straight lines, what do? Take the absolute value, right? So if you see those two straight lines, we're going to take the absolute value. So let's look at number 4. We're going to take the absolute value of 4 because there's those lines. Do you guys see the lines? So absolute value of negative 4 means we're going to look at the distance. So we're going to see how far away is negative 4 from 0, right? So if we count, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So how far away is negative 4? 4. So the absolute value of negative 4 is just 4. What about 6? Now this number line here, it doesn't go out to 6, right? But what do we know about number lines? Do they go on forever? Yes, right? So 6 is actually right after 5. And so if we count from 6 to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's how far away? 6. So do you guys see the pattern yet?
Yeah.
right? So when we take the absolute value, what does that mean? What do we end up doing? So for example, absolute value of negative 115. Do we want to sit here and count from negative 115 all the way to 0? You could. AJ? It's going to be 115? Good. So an easier way to do it is just to look at the number, right? We're counting how far away it is from 0. So whenever we do that, it's always going to be the same number, but it's going to be positive or negative? Positive answer, okay? So it's going to be the positive version of that number. What's the absolute value of 72?
72.
72. Okay, now let's look at this one. They just want you to put the numbers on the number line and decide which ones are bigger and which ones are smaller. Okay, so if we were to look at the numbers, which one would be the smallest?
Negative 5.
Negative 5. So what do we know about the number line? What happens as we go down to the left?
It gets smaller.
So you can write smaller. And as we go to the right, what happens?
Becomes greater.
Bigger or larger?
Why is it greater?
Or greater, right? Smaller, greater, larger. So as we go to the right, numbers get bigger. As we go to the left, they get smaller. Which number would be the largest here then?
4.
4, good. And then 0 is kind of in the middle, right? So that's all you guys really need to know. They get smaller as you go down, larger as you go up. Where would the absolute... Oh, no, let's just not ask that question. That might be confusing. We'll go back to that later. Okay, so that's all we need for right now on this one. We're going to go back to the right side, and we're going to go through some examples real quick. Now, your homework is going to have very similar problems, so make sure you pay attention and ask questions if you get confused, okay? So number 1, absolute value of negative 7. How far away is negative 7 from 0? 7, right? So the answer is 7. Now number 2 looks different, right? We have the absolute value, but what do we have on that left side? We have a negative on the outside. Do you guys see that?
Yes.
So because we have a negative on the outside, we're going to have 2 steps. So first step, we're going to take the absolute value. What's the absolute value of negative 3?
3.
3. However, what's on the outside of that?
Negative.
Negative, so what are we going to have to keep?
Negative.
The negative. So the answer here is negative 3.
So
So remember steps.
So basically the answer just stays the same?
Well, it doesn't stay the same.
It changes and then it goes back.
It changes and ends up at the same number, yes. Because we start with the absolute value is a positive 3, but then we have a negative on the outside, which is the opposite, right? And the opposite of a positive 3 is a negative 3. And number 3, we're going to take the absolute values and we're going to start adding them, okay? So first we're going to take the absolute value, and then second we're going to simplify. So if we take the absolute value, what's the absolute value of 5?
5.
5. And then what's the absolute value of negative 8? 8. And now you just have to make sure you go back. What type of problem was this?
Addition.
Addition, so we're going to keep that, right? We're still adding.
So it's like adding integers now?
Oh. But now we're adding the absolute values. And so it's 5 plus 8?
13.
13. So your answer is 13. Right? And so just like we wrote the notes on the side, make sure first you take the absolute value, then we simplify.
Another one? Like with negative number. I mean, not a negative.
Yeah, you guys will see different ones. 4, absolute value of 2 plus the absolute value of negative 3 minus the absolute value of negative 1. Now notice how I wrote the 1. I wrote it differently because, do you guys see how we have so many lines on there? What starts happening?
Be confused.
You start getting confused, right? There's too many lines. Too many straight lines. There's a lot of subtraction signs. It's like a line party. And then you get confused. And then you get the wrong answer. Right? We want to get the right answer, so then for these ones, just make that one, make those little extra lines, Nick.
Is that a minus or a negative?
So it's minus, and then it's a negative 1 inside.
Oh.
Okay, so what did we say up here? What do we do first?
First, take the absolute value.
Take the absolute value, right? So let's do that first for all the numbers. So what's the absolute value of 2?
Negative
2. We're going to bring down that plus sign, right?
Yes.
What's the absolute value of negative 3?
3.
3. What are we going to do with the subtraction sign? We're going to bring it down. What's the absolute value of negative 1? 1. So we go from this complicated mess to something that looks a lot easier, right? What is 2 plus 3?
5.
5. We have 5 minus 1 is 4. So not too bad, right? As long as you remember to take the absolute value first, it really does help.
So we can look at our notes tonight if we're having trouble.
You can always look at your notes to do homework, right? That's the reason you take notes, so that when you go home, you have something to go back and look at. Because a lot of the time, I know I forget things really quickly, which I'm sure a lot of you guys, it happens as well, right? You go home and you forgot what you did. And so that's why it's important to take out your notes and take a look at them. Number 5, you're going to write this down, and then I want you to think about what is different about this problem when we compare it to the other problems we've been doing.
So, do we solve these?
Okay, so take a look at them. We are going to go through and solve it, but just look at it real quick. What is different from number 5 when we compare it to, for example, number 4, right? What is different about those two? Alyssa?
There's one line at the front and one line at the back, not in between.
Good. So every integer does not have an absolute value, right? Up here, every integer had absolute value. On number 5, we only have one set of absolute value lines. Do you guys see that? So because that happens, when you have those type of problems, first we're going to simplify and then take the absolute value. Again, this is why it's important to keep your notes so that when you go through and do homework, you can go back and look at it. Okay, so you're going to look at the problem and you're going to decide, does each number have absolute value? Then I'm going to do it this way. Then, or you'll look at the problem and say, oh, they only have one set of absolute value lines, then I need to make sure I do it this way. Okay? So simplify. We're going to simplify the inside.
Bless you.
We're going to keep that negative. And we're going to go through and simplify what's on the inside. So that means we're going to add or subtract the numbers. So what's 3 plus a negative 2?
Negative 1.
So 3 plus a negative 2, they're different signs, right? So different signs subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1. Keep the sign of the larger number. Which one's larger? The 3 or the negative 2?
Positive 1.
3. So it's going to be a positive 1. We're going to bring that subtraction sign, right? So I made a mistake on writing the problem. Do you guys see this 1 at the very top?
Yeah.
We're going to make it a negative 1. So it's going to go from a positive 1 to a negative 1. And that was just my mistake. I wrote the problem wrong. So some of you might think, oh, where did that negative come from? Miss Perez made a mistake. So we're fixing it now. So we brought that subtraction sign. And then we're still keeping it a negative 1, right? Are we done simplifying the inside?
No.
No, right? So we're still going to have to simplify it. We're going to go to the right so we have enough space for the next problem. We still have subtraction on the outside. We still have our absolute value signs. What type of problem is this here?
Subtraction, integers, jumping integers.
It's is it subtraction or addition? Joshua? Subtraction. Right, it's subtraction, so we're going to change it into addition, right? So this is going to be 1 plus what?
1. Positive 1.
Positive 1, right? The opposite of a negative 1 is
Positive 1.
positive 1. So we did a keep, change for those of you in case you're confused. We kept the first one, changed subtraction to addition, and then changed the negative 1 to a positive 1. We still have the negative. What's 1 plus 1? 2. What's the absolute value of 2?
-2.
Well, the absolute value of 2 is 2, right? There's a negative on the outside, so the answer is -2. Are you guys seeing how there's a lot of little steps, right? So please try not to rush through them because that's how you make easy mistakes and then you get the problem wrong. So just take your time with it and then you'll find your way to the correct answer. Okay? So we're going to come back and we're still going to do number 6, so just hold off on that real quick. Let's look on the left side. On the left side, what page number is that? 13. We're going to end up gluing it. Are we gluing right now, though? No, so don't grab the glue, please. Just leave it there. We'll glue it in a little bit. Right underneath that, we're going to write down which has the larger value. So we have absolute value of 15, absolute value of -35, absolute value of -2, absolute value of 25. Oh, let me zoom in. Okay, so largest value. You guys see how they all have absolute value signs, right? When you take the absolute value, can that change the number?
Yes.
Yes, right? It's going to give you a different answer. So before we decide which one is larger, what do you think we need to do to each integer? Nick?
Maybe try it instead of, since so we'll have the negative, we just, it's the same number, but all you have to do is find the negative side away.
Okay, so that's how to find the absolute value, right? My question is, what do we do to them first? Robert?
Simplify.
We're going to simplify, and we simplify by taking the absolute value, right? So what's the absolute value of 15? 15. What is the absolute value of -35? 35. What's the absolute value of -2? Absolute value of 25? Okay, so we're going to look at these numbers down here. My poor arrow. Right? We're going to look at these numbers to decide which one is larger. So which ones of the numbers on the bottom are larger? 35 is the largest number, right? Do you guys see how before we took the absolute value, 25 is bigger, right? But because we have those lines, it's telling us we have to take the absolute value. So if we take the absolute value, which one ends up being bigger? 35, which means the absolute value of -35 is actually the largest one. It holds the largest value. Just because we know that simplifies down to 35, and that's going to be bigger than 25. Armando?
Will this kind of thing be on our test? Will it be on our
It'll be on the homework and it'll be on the quiz, yes. Any other questions on that? Remember, the most important thing is to do what? We simplify, right? And you simplify by taking the absolute value. Anyone still writing? We just have one more to get through and we're done. I know these notes are a little bit longer. Okay, so let's look at number 6. We're going to draw a picture. You guys ready for the picture? Okay, so my squiggly line here is water. So squiggly line is water. And then we'll have land. So water, what number did we learn sea level is at?
0.
0, right? So this is our 0. 0 is where the water's at. We're going to draw a mountain that is in the water. Move on to number 6, Tristan. Okay, so if a mountain's in water, right, is it just floating? Some islands float, right? But if it's a mountain, it's going all the way down. And so then, if you go straight up from 0, it's going to be 3,000 feet high. Which I think is really, really high. So it's my imaginary mountain. It also obviously goes below the water, right? So what number would that be at?
Negative 3,000.
Negative, well, we're going to say negative 2,000. I know my picture doesn't make sense because this is bigger. But we're saying it's negative 2,000. And you're going to write down the question, how tall is the mountain? So on your homework, you're going to have one just like this as well, okay? How tall is the mountain? So we're going to have to figure out what we have to add together, right? Who has an idea of what we could do? Let's see. Miguel? We can add them both together. So it would be 3,000 plus, but we have a negative 2,000. So what's our problem here? We have a negative 2,000, right? Because we know that it goes down to negative 2,000. Or it goes down negative 2,000 feet. Edson?
You put lines around the 2,000 and put the absolute value.
Right, so we're going to put our lines in for absolute value. Because this is technically the distance from 0, right? Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
Distance up from 0, distance down from 0. And we know that the distance from 0, that's taking the absolute value, right? And so then to solve this, we just take the absolute value of each one first. So that's going to be 3,000 plus what?
5,000.
You got ahead. 2,000, which is
5,000.
5,000. Now, when you enter your answer in the homework, make sure you don't enter the comma, okay?
Oh, no comma?
No comma when you enter the answer. And when you do the homework, it's going to say on there, do not write the comma. So make sure you read the questions carefully, okay?
Put no feet, right? Like 5,000.
And no feet, right? You don't put feet. This one would be feet, but yeah. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you're going to glue that paper in and then get started on your homework.
I don't think I did it right.